Okay, so this is an exercise that a friend of mine showed me quite recently, and I find it quite interesting how difficult it was to play. So the melody we're going for, it's a triplet-based melody, and if you played it not hand to hand, it's pretty easy. It goes like this. But if you play hand to hand, you end up with all sorts of crossed stickings going on. And the reason I wanted to do this lesson was to show you the way I became comfortable with doing this. Because when you try it, you realize how difficult it is to figure out where your hands are supposed to go. And it's just like a kind of mess of arms and limbs and things. So my approach to doing this was to split the hands up and figure out what each hand is doing. So I'm going to play the pattern, and then I'm going to move my right hand onto my leg just so I can see what the left hand does in this pattern. Okay, so the way I think of this is like an L shape. So I'm going 2 on here, 1 on the snare drum, 2 on here, 1 on the snare drum. So I've got this L shape between the drums. And the right hand plays this. So the right hand is basically playing a diagonal line between the snare drum and that tom. And it's 2 hits on the tom, 1 on the snare. So both hands, it's always 2 hits on the toms and 1 on the snare. So the left hand is going this tom snare, that tom snare, and the right hand is always going between this tom and the snare. So when I'm putting the whole thing together, I just use those 2 shapes to help me figure out where my hands have to go. And it makes it easier to speed up. So give it a try. It's pretty tricky to start out with, but I think, like I said, it's a good exercise for getting into this idea of using shapes to figure out where your hands are going to go. And another thing to keep in mind when you're practicing this is the snare drum notes should be quiet and the tom notes should be loud. So think about sticking height, and when you go for the toms, make sure you have nice big full strokes. So I'll do the left hand part. So it's much easier if you play full strokes, i.e. hit the drum, let it come right back up, and then a downstroke on the second one, so you can have a quiet note on the snare drum, and then you're going to play an upstroke on the snare drum, so you can have a full stroke on the floor tom, and then a downstroke, and then back to the snare. The alternative would be that you play downstrokes all the time and lift up in the middle, which would look like this. And that's a lot harder to speed up. So you want to make use of the rebound of the stick, play these full strokes. And the same thing with the right hand. And that's it. Short and sweet, but give it a try. It's more difficult than it looks.